Okay, let's unpack this because if you look at a map of the Middle East, the Persian Gulf just looks like this permanent, ancient fixture of our planet, right?
Oh, totally.
It's this incredibly distinct, almost, finger-like body of water reaching inland, guarded by that very narrow pinch point at the end.
Hmm.
And usually when we look at maps, we just accept them as the fixed reality of the world.
Right, like they've always been that way.
Exactly. But if you were standing right in the middle of that gulf just 10,000 years ago, you wouldn't be treading water. You'd literally be standing in a dry, grassy valley, dodging massive ancient river systems.
It completely shatters the illusion of a static Earth. I mean, in this deep dive, we are asking you to rethink everything you thought you knew about this particular stretch of water and land.
Yeah, so our mission today is to explore some excerpts from a really fascinating geological text. It's called Tectonic Origins and Geological Evolution of the Persian Gulf.
Such a great read.
It really is. We are unpacking deep time, incredibly slow but violent tectonic separation, and a dramatic level of marine flooding that created one of the world's most recognizable bodies of water.
And to truly grasp what the sources are detailing here, I want you to first visualize the Arabian Peninsula. Because most of us, we picture it as this massive block of desert and rock, immovable and timeless.
Just sitting there.
Right, just sitting there. But you have to imagine it not as a fixed piece of land, but as a moving puzzle piece sliding around on a highly dynamic Earth. The geology of this region isn't just ancient history. It is an active, ongoing engine.
An active engine. I love that. And, to understand the water we see today, we first have to look at the rock beneath it. We need to rewind the geological clock back roughly 30 million years.
Yeah, 30 million years ago, the map of the world looked entirely different. The Arabian Plate, which is the massive fragment of Earth's crust that holds the entire peninsula, wasn't a separate entity at all.
Wait, really?
Not at all. It was firmly glued to the African continent. It was, for all intents and purposes, just the northeastern corner of Africa.
That is so hard to picture.
I know, but Earth's crust is never resting. The sources describe these immense tectonic forces deep within the Earth's mantle that began pulling this Arabian puzzle piece away from Africa.
It makes me think of, like, grabbing the edge of a thick crust of bread and slowly, relentlessly tearing it away from the loaf.
That's a really visceral way to picture it, yeah.
And that massive tear on the crust, that opened up the entire space that is now the Red Sea to the west, right?
Exactly.
Right?
And that tearing motion is critical because, well, if the Arabian Plate is tearing away from Africa and moving eastward, it has to be crashing into something else.
Because there are no empty spaces on a tectonic map.
Right, exactly. As the western edge pulled away, the northeastern edge of the Arabian Plate began plowing directly into the massive Eurasian Plate.
So it's basically a slow-motion continental car crash.
A collision that is still happening right now, actually. Yeah, this ongoing convergence, this crushing together of two massive continental plates is literal world building. Because continental crust is relatively buoyant, it doesn't just sink easily into the Earth's mantle.
It doesn't just disappear.
Right. Instead, it crumples. The extreme pressure is pushing the Earth upward, folding and thrusting millions of tons of rock into the sky. And that is what created the Zagros Mountains in Iran.
Okay, so visualizing millions of years of solid rock bending is tough.
Yeah.
But it's almost like, okay, imagine sitting heavily on the very edge of a memory foam mattress.
Oh, okay.
The Zagros Mountains are your body weight pushing down. If you look at what happens to the mattress right next to where you are sitting, it naturally dips downward. It flexes to create a depression or a bowl right next to the weight.
That is a perfect way to visualize it. What's fascinating here is that the crust of the Earth behaves in a very similar way, just on a much larger, stiffer scale.
Right.
Geologists call the Persian Gulf a foreland basin. It's essentially a massive, shallow bowl created purely because the Arabian Plate is bending and flexing downward under the staggering, unimaginable weight of the Zagros Mountains pushing up against its edge.
So the mountains are actually so heavy, they're warping the continental plate next to them. That is wild.
It is.
But a basin doesn't just stay empty for millions of years, right? As those mountains were rising, they were simultaneously being destroyed by the elements.
Yes, geology is a constant cycle of creation and destruction. Over millions of years, wind, rain, and gravity constantly wore away at the new Zagros peaks.
Just grinding them down.
Exactly. All those ground-up sediments, the limestone, the shale, the evaporites, they washed down the mountainsides. They essentially flowed into that dipping memory foam bowl you described.
Right, filling it up.
So the foreland basin wasn't just forming, It was simultaneously being filled with incredibly thick layers of eroded sediment.
Okay, this sets the stage perfectly. We have the Great Divorce from Africa, the big squeeze into Eurasia, the rising mountains, and this giant dipping basin filling up with mud and rock.
That's the foundation, yes.
But having a sediment-filled depression is one thing. The real question is how it became a sea. Because according to our sources, the answer involves an event that is surprisingly recent.
Yeah, well, to understand the water, we have to look at the geometry of the basin itself. The Persian Gulf is not like the open ocean. It is incredibly shallow.
How shallow are we talking?
On average, you are only looking at depths of about 30 to 50 meters.
30 to 50 meters, that is nothing. You could take a standard mid-sized office building, drop it in the middle of the Gulf, and the top floors would still be catching the sunshine above the waves.
Yeah, it's basically a puddle in geological terms. And because it's so shallow, the Gulf is highly sensitive to global sea level changes.
Oh, no.
During periods of lower sea levels, specifically during the last ice age, massive amounts of the Earth's water were locked up in immense glaciers at the poles.
Right, because it was frozen solid.
Exactly. When that much water is frozen on land, the global ocean level drops significantly by over 100 meters in some periods.
Which means the ocean simply retreated so far that the waters never reached this foreland basin at all. It was a vast, dry valley.
Completely exposed.
Yeah.
And we know from geological evidence that it was crossed by expansive, ancient river systems winding their way across the basin floor toward the distant ocean.
Hold on, I need to push back here. You're saying this whole sea was a dry valley just 10,000 years ago.
Yep, about 10,000 years ago.
In geological terms, that's literally yesterday. I mean, human civilization was already sparking into existence. Humans were building early agricultural settlements in the wider region by then.
They absolutely were.
So how do geologists actually know there were river systems down there if the entire area is currently buried under 50 meters of ocean water?
It's a great question, and it really comes down to modern technology mapping ancient topography. Geologists don't just guess, you know. They use bathymetric sonar and seismic reflection profiling.
Okay, sounds fancy. How does that work?
They basically send sound waves down through the water and into the seabed. By analyzing how those waves bounce back, they can map the layers of sediment beneath the ocean floor.
Oh, wow.
And when they do that in the Persian Gulf, they clearly see the buried, winding channels of ancient rivers, known as paleochannels, carved right into the bedrock.
No way.
Yeah, we can map exactly where the rivers flowed before the water rose.
That is wild. We have actual sonic maps of a drowned landscape. So as the last ice age ended, the glaciers melted and the global ocean levels surged back up.
That's right.
And because this valley was directly connected to the ocean, the rising seawater finally just spilled over the edge and drowned the entire basin.
Exactly. And this actually raises an important question about how we classify bodies of water. You see, the Persian Gulf isn't a true deep ocean basin formed by plates pulling apart at the bottom of the sea. It is, at its core, just a flooded, sediment-filled continental valley. The ocean just spilled in. That's the only reason it exists as a sea today, and why it's so incredibly shallow.
But a flooded valley this massive needs a connection to the open ocean. And the sources make a huge point of focusing on the southeastern exit, which is, well, anything but a simple doorway.
Right. While the main Gulf is this gentle, shallow flooded basin, the geological rules change entirely at its narrow southeastern exit. That is the Strait of Hormuz.
The famous bottleneck, the gateway to the deep waters of the Gulf of Oman and eventually the Arabian Sea.
Yes. But the sources point out the Strait of Hormuz is not just a narrow version of the main Gulf. It is a zone of incredibly complex structural deformation, full of severe rock folding and deep faulting.
And the depth profile changes radically there too, right?
Radically. We established the main Gulf is basically a puddle, averaging 30 to 50 meters deep. But the strait has a central channel that reaches 60 to 100 meters deep.
Oh, wow. That's a big drop.
It is, and that deeper channel is the only reason massive, deep draft supertankers can actually navigate in and out of the region today. However, the depth isn't uniform.
What do you mean here?
It's significantly shallower on the margins, particularly over on the Arabian or Omani side, where coastal sediment buildup has essentially raised the seabed.
So what does this all mean for the water? Because you've got a shallow basin trying to exchange immense amounts of water with the open ocean through a tiny pinch point.
It's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, it sounds like putting your thumb over a garden hose. So was this deep, 100-meter channel just carved out by millions of gallons of water rushing through a bottleneck, acting like an underwater pressure washer, scouring away the rock.
It's a very logical assumption that the water carved the channel, but it's actually the other way around.
Wait, really?
Yeah, it's a much more elegant combination of factors. The deep channel actually aligns with what geologists call structural tectonic lows.
Meaning the Earth itself dropped down.
Precisely. Think of the fault lines, the deep fractures in the Earth caused by all that intense tectonic pressure we talked about earlier.
Right, the car crash.
Exactly. Along some of these fault lines in the strait, massive blocks of the Earth's crust have actually subsided. They've dropped downward due to the stretching and cracking of the crust, creating deep, natural trenches in the rock.
Oh, I see.
So the deep channel was initially created by tectonic forces dropping the floor out from underneath.
The container was built before the water even started flowing through it. That is fascinating. But if the trench is just sitting there, wouldn't all that sediment washing around eventually fill it back up?
And that's where your pressure washer idea comes back into play, just in a secondary role. Once those tectonic low points were created, the incredibly strong tidal currents that flow back and forth through this narrow strait act like a broom.
Sweeping it out.
Yes. They continuously sweep through those structural trenches, carrying away the sand and mud that would otherwise fill them in. So the tectonics drop the floor, and the oceanography, the tidal currents, keeps it clean and deep.
It is a dynamic, constant battle between tectonics, sedimentation, and ocean currents.
Right, well said.
To truly visualize these intense, chaotic geological forces grinding together, you don't actually need to put on a scuba suit and dive 100 meters to the bottom of the Strait of Hormuz.
Thankfully.
Right. The sources tell us you just need to look up at the islands that were literally pushed out of the water.
The islands in this region are like open books, detailing the forces working below the surface. The text highlights two islands in particular that tell vastly different stories: Karg Island and Keshem Island.
Let's start with Karg Island. It sits up in the northwestern part of the Gulf, and the text describes its geology as Miocene and Pliocene carbonate rocks.
Mainly limestones and marls.
Okay, break that down for us.
To understand what that means, you have to picture the shallow marine environment that existed before the basin fully formed. Over millions of years, the shells and calcium-rich skeletons of billions of tiny marine organisms settled on the ocean floor.
Like a microscopic graveyard.
Exactly. Over time, the immense pressure of the water and overlying sediment compacted those fragile shells into solid carbonate rock.
So Karg is basically an island made of ancient, compacted sea life.
Yeah.
But, how does a flat layer of rock on the seabed suddenly become an island sticking out of the waves?
It all goes back to our memory foam natris analogy.
Oh, right, the bending.
Remember how the Arabian plate is flexing downward under the Zagros Mountains?
Yeah.
When a massive, rigid continental plate flexes, it doesn't just bend perfectly smoothly like rubber, it bucks.
Yeah.
There are localized wrinkles, subtle warping, and gentle faulting across the basin as the crust deals with the stress.
Oh, I see.
Karg Island represents one of these gentle structural highs. The crust simply buckled upward slightly, slowly pushing that layer of limestone above the sea level.
A gentle ripple from the mountain building, hundreds of miles away. And once it was exposed, the ocean waves just sculpted it into cliffs.
Right.
The source material actually refers to Karg as having a relatively simple geology.
Which is the perfect contrast. Because when we travel down the Gulf to the northern margin of the Strait of Hormuz, we find our second island, Kish.
And there is absolutely nothing simple about Kesh.
Nothing at all.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The text calls Keshem a textbook example of salt tectonics, and this completely blew my mind. We're talking about an island essentially driven by salt.
It's incredible. Keshem is subject to intense, violent deformation because it sits right near the actual plate boundary.
Right in the crumple zone of the collision between the Arabian and Eurasian plates.
Exactly. But what makes Keshem truly mind-bending is what lies deep beneath it. Underneath the rock of Keshem are incredibly thick layers of what is called Hormuz salt.
And these aren't just small salt deposits, right?
No, these are massive, ancient evaporites, vast layers of salt left behind when ancient, shallow seas evaporated entirely. Wow.
And these salt deposits aren't 30 million years old like the Red Sea split. They were deposited more than 500 million years ago.
500 million years ago. That means there's 500 million years worth of heavy rock and sediment piled on top of this salt layer.
Now picture that tectonic collision again. The plates are crashing together, squeezing the entire region from the sides with unimaginable force.
It's literally like a buried tube of toothpaste.
Yes.
You have this 500 million-year-old layer of salt trapped deep underground beneath miles of solid, heavy rock. When the tectonic plates crash together, they are squeezing the region, essentially squeezing the tube.
Perfect analogy.
Under that kind of immense pressure and trapped by the heat deep in the earth, solid rock salt stops acting like a brittle mineral, doesn't it? It acts almost like plastic. It squishes.
The salt behaves plastically, and because salt is actually less dense than the heavy sedimentary rock sitting on top of it, and because it's being squeezed relentlessly from the sides, the salt has nowhere to go but up.
Right.
It literally flows upward toward the surface, defying gravity, squeezing the toothpaste up through the rock.
Geologists call these upward flows diapirs or salt domes. As millions of tons of plastic salt force their way upward, they violently push the overlying rock layers out of the way.
Just ripping through it.
They stretch the surface rock, fracture it, and thrust it up into the sky. That uplifting force, driven entirely from below by migrating salt, creates elongated, arch-like folds in the rock called anticlines.
Wow.
That warped, highly fractured terrain is exactly what makes up Question Island.
An island born because a half-billion-year-old layer of salt was squished upward by a slow-motion continental car crash.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it perfectly illustrates the contrast the sources want you to see.
Right.
Karg Island is the gentle, distant rippling of that tectonic collision. Quesham Island is the violent, chaotic, salt-driven reality of being right on the fault line.
This entirely changes how I will ever look at a map of the region. I mean, the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz aren't just blue spaces on a piece of paper or political boundaries. They are real-time, visible evidence of massive Earth systems actively at work.
Absolutely.
The Arabian Peninsula is not a static desert. It is a moving vehicle, actively shaping the world around it today.
It is a geology in motion. And, if there is one thought from the source material that you should really sit with, it's a look into the deep future.
Well, I like where this is going.
The sources make it definitively clear that the Arabian Plate is still moving toward Eurasia today. The collision hasn't stopped.
Right.
The Zagros Mountains are still rising, pushing higher into the sky. The Earth's crust is still flexing,
The engine hasn't turned off.
which means the map is still being drawn. As that slow-motion crash continues over the next few million years, will the ongoing collision eventually crush the Strait of Hormuz completely shut?
Oh, wow. Just pinch it off entirely.
Think about it. If that gateway closes, cutting off the deep ocean currents, the shallow waters of the Persian Gulf would be isolated.
Right, because it's so shallow.
Under the intense Middle Eastern sun, this vital sea could eventually evaporate completely, turning back into a dry valley and leaving behind nothing but a massive, shimmering salt flat.
That is haunting.
It's a geological destiny that the tectonic forces are actively writing right now.
A flooded valley returning to salt. The Earth is constantly rewriting its own history. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. The next time you see a map, remember the ground beneath your feet is a lot more fluid than you think. Keep questioning what